More in sixth grade. Welcome to History in Chapter 23. We're going to move on to the political and industrial revolutions that are going to take place all around the world. Let's see why it matters. One of the lessons coming up is the French Revolution. It says the people of France have risen up. They have stormed prisons, seized property, set nobles on the run. In Paris, the capital, crowds fill the streets, thrilled with their power. Yet problems remain. The poor are hungrier than ever. It may be a long time before there will be work to do or safe places to set up markets. As you read this chapter, note how revolution can lead to great joy and tragically, guys, great tragedy. So we're going to see a theme as we go through this as these countries start to go through some political upheaval. You're like, yeah, get rid of the old way. But they don't really have a new way set up, so they run into some problems. Okay, time and place as we go through this. We're going to talk about some of the major wars and things that are happening. We will start today in America and our fight for revolution, and then it's going to spread to France, it's going to spread to South America, and then it's going to lead to the other things we're talking about this chapter, which is the Industrial Revolution and what we call nationalism and the changes that go along with it. All right, let's get lesson one, the American Revolution. Guys, we're going to get the whole American Revolution in just, I don't know why it's doing that. Hopefully it'll keep working. We're going to get the whole American Revolution in one lesson. Next year when you study American history, you'll get way more details about the American Revolution. It says, let's see why conflict developed. The American Revolution guaranteed the freedoms that we still have in America today. When we learn about the difficult struggle to gain this independence, hopefully we'll value and protect our freedoms all the more, which is a great encouragement for us, guys, to say there was a hefty price that was paid. That hefty price has been paid again and again and again with the different wars we fought. We got to make sure we hang on to the freedoms and protect them and value them. In other words, never take them for granted. The first permanent English colony in North America was set up by the Virginia Company in an area what today is now Virginia. The company owners wanted riches and planned to make money from the colony. People who wanted religious freedom, such as the Puritans, established other colonies in North America. Early in the 1600s, Puritans in England were persecuted for their beliefs. When a group is persecuted, its members are punished and made to suffer. So people sometimes persecute others because of religious differences. We've seen that in the Bible, guys. Obviously, many Christians were persecuted by the Romans. The Jews have been persecuted throughout history. And so we have this also happening in England. So in 1620, a group of Puritans that were known as the Pilgrims left Britain for America so that they could worship freely. They sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in a ship that was called the Mayflower, and they landed in what is today the state of Massachusetts. Their settlement was called Plymouth. You might have heard them land on Plymouth Rock. Okay, so guys, you got the Pilgrims, known as the Puritans or the Pilgrims, same thing. They set up the state of Massachusetts. The success of Plymouth may have influenced other Puritans to come to America. So in 1630, about 1,000 Puritans founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Others soon followed. By the mid-1640s, there were more than 20,000 Puritans living in America for their religious freedom. Other people seeking religious freedom set up colonies elsewhere along the Atlantic coast. For example, English Catholics founded Maryland in 1634. The Quakers, a religious group that was also persecuted in England, established Pennsylvania in 1680. On your test, guys, we're going to name these three states, and you need to know the group of people that were there. So you have the Catholics in Maryland, you have the Puritans and Pilgrims in Massachusetts, and you have the Quakers who established Pennsylvania. When the first English settlers arrived in North America, they came into contact with Native Americans. At first, the two groups lived peacefully. The English learned Native American farming skills. Settlers began eating local foods such as corn and beans. As more English settlers arrived, however, the relationship got worse. Native Americans often died of diseases brought by the English, or they went to battle and they died in the battles with the settlers overland. So it starts out peacefully, guys, but tragically it turns south in a hurry as more and more people come, and the English think they have the right to just take it. By the early 1700s, the English had 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast of North America. Settlers in the northern colonies found a cool or moderate climate and rocky soil. The land was more suitable for smaller farms than the warmer, more fertile southern colonies. So in the south, large plantations worked by enslaved Africans grew crops for export. Self-government began early in England's American colonies to attract more settlers. The Virginia Company gave colonists in Virginia the right to elect what they called burgesses. We would say today representatives. The elected burgesses formed what they called the House of Burgesses. Today in our Congress we call it the House of Representatives. It was modeled on England's Parliament. The House of Burgesses first met in 1619. So guys, it wasn't too long before we started to realize, man, we need some government going on. The House of Burgesses set an example of what is called representative government, or a government in which people elect representatives to make the laws. So guys, we have that all over America today. I don't make my own laws. We're too big as a state even. And so I elect representatives to go to Wisconsin and make the laws for us. The Puritans in Massachusetts also wanted to govern themselves. Before leaving the Mayflower, the Pilgrims signed an agreement called the Mayflower Compact. They agreed that they would choose their own leaders and make their own laws. Here's their Mayflower Compact. We, whose names are underwritten, meaning they all signed it before they got off the boat, have undertaken for the glory of God, the advancement of the Christian faith, a voyage to plant a colony, to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws as shall be thought most acceptable and convenient for the general good of the colony. So guys, these guys get on a boat, they're sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, they say, we should have a plan on what this is going to look like, and they sign the Mayflower Compact to do those things that was going to hold the people. When we get off this boat, we're going to stick together and do these things. Over the years, most of the English colonies developed what they call constitutions. Constitutions are written plans for the government. These documents let the colonists elect assemblies and protect their rights. Let's see how those rights go. During the 1700s, many changes came to England and its colonies. In 1707, England united with Scotland to now be called Britain. The term British came to mean both the English and the Scots. Meanwhile, the colonies came to depend on Britain for trade and defense. So it's kind of interesting, guys, how it starts out. We have these colonies, and they depend on them. They're like, hey, you're an established country for forever. We are brand new. We need some help. And so thank goodness that Big Brother here is here to take care of me. The American colonies shipped their raw materials to Britain. In return, they received British manufactured products as well as tea and spices from Asia. To control this trade, Britain passed what's called the Navigation Acts. Under these laws, the colonists had to sell their products to Britain, even if they could get a better price elsewhere. Any goods bought from other colonies had to go to Britain first and then get taxed before going to America. So here's what Britain does. Britain says, hey, we'll look out for you, but it's going to come at a price. All the products that you have, America, you must ship to Britain. Now, what happens if France wants to pay more money? Can't. What happens if Canada wants to give more money? Can't. You have to go here. It's the same thing. Britain's going to take, let's say, the cotton, and it's going to turn it into clothes. If I want to buy clothes, I have to buy it from Britain. What happens if France is going to sell it to me cheaper? Can't. Everything is going through Britain, guys. That's the Navigation Act. Now let's see how we thought about the Navigation Act. The colonists at first accepted those trade laws. Why? Because Britain was a guaranteed buyer of their raw materials. So in other words, right now I have guaranteed business. So this works for me. Could I get better prices somewhere else? I have no idea. All I know is I have guaranteed prices. And so I'm making it in America because I have a buyer. Later, as the colonies grew though, colonists wanted to produce their own manufactured good. They also wanted to sell their products elsewhere if they could get higher prices. many colonial merchants began smuggling goods in and out of the colonies. What is smuggling? Smuggling is shipping products without paying the taxes or getting government permission. So it's supposed to go Britain to America or America to Britain. What'd they do? I said, you know what? France is paying more, so I'm just going to go right to France. Now, guys, that's illegal, so I have to hope I can pull that off and get away with it. So today, guys, smuggling is an illegal thing. Do people still do it? Like crazy. Why? Because you can make more money. You're avoiding the taxes that is going on with that. So once America starts to get established and they said, we want to make our own goods, we don't need Britain anymore, there's changes that happen. We'll see how Britain handles it. Between 1756 and 1763, Britain and France fought a war for control of North America. When Britain won, it gained nearly all of France's North American empire. The conflict, however, left Britain deeply in debt. So, desperate for money, the British made plans to tax the American colonists and tighten trade rules. So these two countries, Britain and France, duke it out. Britain wins. They get a ton of land, guys, but they're dead broke. France lost, so they're not too happy with Britain, right? That's why France helps us in the fight here, guys, that we'll talk about. And now Britain says, okay, we got to start getting our money back. How are we going to do it? In 1765, Parliament passed what's called the Stamp Act, which taxed newspapers and other printed material. These items had to bear a stamp showing that the tax was paid. The colonists were outraged. They responded by boycotting British goods. Boycotting is refusing to buy specific products in protest. So I want to buy a book, it says, fine, you can buy that book, you just have to pay the tax. I can't say that, guys, because as soon as the tax gets put on there, now there's more prices that are being added to it. In other words, in America, let's just make it up, I was buying a book for $10. Now the taxes come, so books cost $12. Because they're going to take $2 of those dollars and send it back to Britain to get some money. And so I'm like, forget that. I'm just not going to buy any books. And so Britain, you're not going to get the money that you wanted. Now, in my example, guys, that also hurt us who made the books. But if we're buying, let's say, the books that were made in Britain, now Britain's getting double hit because they're not getting the tax. They're also not getting the selling of the books. For boycotting to work, guys, we have to get everybody to boycott so that they feel the hurt of the money that they're missing. Okay, finally, 9 colonies. Did I click too far? No, I did not. Finally, 9 colonies sent delegates to a Stamp Act Congress in New York City. The Congress declared that Parliament could not tax the colonies because the colonies did not have representatives in the Parliament. That's in Britain, guys. The colonists united under a slogan, no taxation without representation. They believed that only colonial legislatures had the right to tax them. The British government backed down for a while, but it still needed money. So in 1767, they now put taxes on glass, lead, paper, paint, tea, and it goes on, guys. And so, guys, it wasn't that America was saying no taxation, period. It was simply saying, we want a say in this. So let us be in on this. And maybe we go back to my example of $10 books and we say, how about it's $10.50? We'll give you 50 cents. We understand where you're coming from. We understand that you're the powerful nation. We understand that we're underneath you. But your $12 a book was too much. And how about you tax paper but not lead? Or you tax tea but not glass? Give us a say in it so that we agree to it. Right now, you're just passing laws. We have no say. We have no choice. It's not fair. It's going to keep getting worse and worse. The Americans hated the new taxes. Mobs attacked royal tax collectors, and writers made fun of Britain's king. Worried, the British sent troops to Boston, Massachusetts. This is where the strongest protests were taking place. In March of 1770, British troops and American colonists clashed. A Boston crowd threw snowballs at the British soldiers. The soldiers fired their weapons, and 5 people were killed. The event became known as the Boston Massacre. In response, Parliament repealed or canceled all the taxes except the one that they had on tea. Okay, guys, who do you think called it the Boston Massacre? Americans or British? Well, the Americans call it a massacre, guys, because they want to make the British look bad. I don't think too many of us today, if we were in a battle and said, how many people died? 5, would call it a massacre. We would say it's a tragedy, it's sad, but a massacre is when like 30,000 die or 10,000 die. This was 5. It was sad because the 5 were throwing snowballs and the British were shooting weapons, and so we can paint this really horrible picture, guys. But what it comes down to is just one side's view of it compared to the other side's view of it. If you were a British soldier, you would say, hey, they were throwing snowballs in there. Hey, there were rocks inside the snowballs. Hey, I have no idea what's happening next. Hey, there's a lot of them. And so it reacted, and off you go. Britain is scared, guys, so the first thing they do is they cancel most of these rules that are making them mad, except the one on tea. 3 years later, Parliament passed the Tea Act. It allowed the British East India Company to ship tea to the colonies without paying the tax that Americans had to pay. This allowed the company to sell its tea cheaply and threatened to drive the American tea merchants out of business. In other words, guys, if you're selling tea and you're in America and you have to pay the tea tax, you're going to sell your tea for, let's say, $2 because you have to pay $1 in tax. So you're actually only making $1. I work for this East India Company. I show up and I sell my tea for $1.25. Well, if you want to buy tea, you're like, I could pay $2 or I could pay $1.25. I'm paying $1.25. So you're buying my tea from me because it's way cheaper, because I don't have to send Britain that dollar in tax. I just get to keep it. So I'm actually making more money because I'm selling it for $1.25 when it only costs $1, and I don't have to pay the tax. So you can imagine how angry that makes them, guys. So in Boston, angry colonists decided to take action. A group of protesters disguised themselves as Native Americans. They boarded the British ships that were in the harbor, and they dumped all their tea into the water. This, known as the Boston Tea Party. So you just took all this tea that these guys were going to sell, that you didn't think was fair, and dumped it all in the water. How does Britain react? To punish the colonists, Parliament passed laws that shut down Boston Harbor and placed Massachusetts under military control. So we're going to send our troops, Britain is. It also required the colonists to house and feed the British troops. So what happened is Britain sends their troops over, guys, and what they do is they say, well, where are you going to stay? I'm going to stay in your house. You have to give me a room to live in and food every single day. Can you imagine how that would go in America? If the enemy, how America, a lot of American people are viewing them, this is the enemy now, and I had to take care of you. And you'd say, well, just fight back. Say no. The British can arrest you. The British can put you on trial. The British can punish you guys. So it was, you have to grin and bear that. The colonists called these laws the Intolerable Acts, or laws that you just can't accept. The acts made the colonies realize that they had to work together in order to defend themselves and their liberties. So in 1774, delegates from 12 colonies met in Philadelphia, which was what was called the First Continental Congress. Guys, not even all 13 went. In other words, the big challenge here is, who do we side with? And a lot of people living in America said, man, we still came from Britain. Britain is still like the mother country. It's who we belong to. So no, I don't want to rebel against them. And one colony didn't even have any representatives to go. They demanded that the Intolerable Acts be repealed. Colonial leaders, however, could not agree about what to do. Some, such as George Washington, hoped to settle the dispute with Britain. In other words, let's work this out. Others, like Samuel Adams of Massachusetts and Patrick Henry, wanted the colonies to declare independence. In other words, these guys said, let's break off from them. So you have, even look at this, guys, George Washington. We know in a second when we read on the next page, he's going to become the leader in the fight against it. At the beginning, guys, he didn't. He said, let's work this out. We need Britain. These other guys are like, no, we don't. Let's go to war. Well, the colonial leaders debated. Fighting began in Massachusetts. British soldiers set out to destroy colonial weapons being stored in a town called Concord. So on April 19th, 1775, they met armed colonists at Lexington and fought, which is the first battle of the American Revolution. So guys, just a few days ago was the anniversary of the start of the American Revolution. News of the conflict spread throughout the colonies. In the next month, in May of 75, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. It created an army and it named George Washington as its commander. The Congress, however, tried one last time to settle the differences with British. Members sent an appeal to King George. He refused to listen. So it was, guys, we're willing to go to war. We've already fought a few battles. We are now training and getting an army together. Britain, here's our demands. Britain says, I ain't listening to you, we'll destroy you. So more and more Americans began to think that independence was probably the only answer. So in January of 76, in a pamphlet called Common Sense, Thomas Paine called on the colonists to break away from Britain. So you got the people starting to take the steps. Asking, working, fighting, all these people are working for it. On July 4th, 1776, the Congress issued what's called the Declaration of Independence. It was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. The Declaration stated that the colonies were separating from Britain and forming a new nation, which was called the United States of America. Guys, what it really did was it picked a fight. They said, we want to be free. Please don't think Britain said, okay, we'll just let you be free because you declared your independence. They said, please, we'll bring you back under control, and so Britain's going to go to war with them. But what America was willing to say is, we are willing to fight for this. Let's go. In the Declaration, Jefferson explained why the Americans were creating a new nation. He referred to John Locke's, who we talked about last time, idea that people can overthrow a government that ignores their rights. The Declaration stated that all men are created equal and have certain God-given rights. King George III had violated those rights, so the colonists had the right to rebel. Welcome to John Locke, guys, and the major influence he had on America.
Mr. Bauer?
Yep.
Can you send out Jaden Davis?
You bet I can.
Thank you.
Well, sixth grade, like all times when there's an interruption, there's your extra credit right on the top of the page. Jaden got buzzed down to the office. All right, let's finish and get the American victory. The Declaration turned, let me scroll back so you get all these filled in. There we go. The Declaration turned the conflict into a war for independence. The struggle was long and bitter. The American Continental Army had fewer and less disciplined soldiers than British. So bad news. We don't have as many, and we're not very good. However, they had a really good general in George Washington. The British had the disadvantage of, one, trying to fight a war a long way from home. Two, they also had to conquer the whole country in order to win. The Americans only had to hold out until the British accepted defeat. So guys, here's what America's plan was. Let's make this war take a long time. Let's drag it out. Because what does Britain have to do? Britain has to keep sending troops all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. And the longer it goes out, the better the chance that I'm going to, if I was Britain, I'd surrender. It would look like this. If I'm a British soldier, I get on a boat and I sail across the ocean. And I'm fighting for 1 year. And I'm fighting for 2 years. And the war's dragging on. And I'm going, man, I miss home. I want to see my wife and my kids. And then I start to get really frustrated and say, British, what are we fighting for? I'm halfway around the world. It's just not worth it for me. And so America's goal is, let's lengthen this thing out. Let's make it take a long time. And so despite the fact that we didn't have very many troops, and despite the fact that they weren't very good, we had a really good game plan. The turning point came in October of 77, so we're a year and a half into this war. Some people would say we're over 2 years into the war. We fought these first skirmishes up in 75. We're all the way into 77. Americans won the Battle of Saratoga in New York. Okay, so guys, why is it the turning point? France, which was Britain's old enemy, realized that the colonists had a chance, and so they agreed to help the Americans. So the turning point comes because France looks at us and says, man, you guys have a chance. We're in. Why didn't they help us at the beginning? Because they said, you guys are going to get walloped, and as soon as you get walloped, if we would help you right away from the beginning, you get walloped, then Britain's going to turn around and wallop us for trying to help you, and we get walloped again, so forget it. As soon as France says, you guys got a chance, they said, we're in with you, because what do we really want? We want you to take out Britain, and we're going to help you do it. So, the final victory came in 81 at the Battle of Yorktown. So So guys, the first battle at Lexington and Concord, the turning point, Saratoga, the final one, Yorktown. You'll need that for your test. American and French forces surrounded and trapped the British. The British surrendered, peace talk began. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris ended the war, and Britain accepted our independence. So in 83, guys, is when we finally, I guess you'd say, accepted our independence. When do we say we became a nation? In 76, July 4th, 1776. That's what we celebrate on Independence Day. Let's see how we do as a nation. In other words, let's go back to that chapter opener. Hey, sometimes it's great joy and sometimes it's great tragedy. Yay, we're free! The United States at first was a confederation. What's a confederation? It's a loose union of independent states. In other words, we are 13 individuals that live on the same country. Its plan of government was called the Articles of Confederation. The Articles created a national government, but the states held most powers. It soon became clear, guys, that these Articles of Confederation were too weak to deal with the nation's problems. So here comes the tragedy. We were super excited, we won our independence, guys, but we really don't know how to run a huge nation. Britain has always been the example for us, and now we broke free from them, so it becomes a challenge. So we have the Articles of Confederation, guys, to make sure we understand we're too weak. So to change the Articles, 55 delegates met in Philadelphia in 87. They decided instead to write a constitution for an entirely new national government. The new United States Constitution set up a federal system, which divided powers between a national government and the states. So today, guys, we still talk that way. You have your federal government. That's what comes out of Washington, D.C. We also have our state government. So we have a lot of things working between those two. In other words, our state is supposed to work with the federal government. Lots of times you'll hear how we get federal money, or we'll claim a federal disaster. Now, why do we claim a federal disaster? Let's say there's a really bad storm in Wisconsin. A blizzard wipes out all kinds of things. We would go and we'd say it's a federal disaster. Why? So that our federal government comes in and gives us help, not just our state government. The delegates divided power in the national government between the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. What we had in last chapter that we learned about, guys. The system of checks and balances that we talked about last chapter enabled each branch to limit the powers of the other branches. In other words, we want checks and balances. We want three branches. Why? We don't want to turn into Britain. We just fought a war of independence away from Britain. The Constitution made the United States a republic with elected president. In 89, George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. That same year, we added a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. The Bill of Rights guaranteed certain rights to citizens of the government could not violate. These include the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press. You can print things. The right by trial by jury. So we have our Bill of Rights, guys, super important to us. The U.S. Constitution was shaped by Enlightenment principles. One of those is popular sovereignty, the idea that government receives its powers from the people. If the people aren't happy, that government needs to go. Hint, hint, what they just did to Britain. Another principle is limited government, or the idea that a government may use only the powers given to it by the people. Guys, this one in my mind is one of the things we struggle with today. What do we want to limit our government with, or what should we let our government do to us? And there's a lot of different views. Some people are like, give the government a lot of power. Some people are like, no, we don't want the government to have that much power. So this is always up for debate, guys, on what is our definition of popular sovereignty and limited government. All right, guys, that was real fast, and it did not do justice to the American Revolution. But like I said, we don't go anything big because we're studying the overall world history in this class. You'll get into all the fine details next year as you continue with your studies. All right, good luck on the worksheet that goes along with it, and have a blessed weekend.